You know that moment when the universe decides it hasn't messed with your life enough? The one where it pauses its cosmic shenanigans, takes a deep breath, and declares, "You know what? Let's dial up the absurdity to 11." Yeah, I found out the universe is practically a distant, slightly unhinged relative of my husband. More specifically, it was the moment I stumbled upon the digital equivalent of a smoking gun, a concert ticket confirmation in Mark's email, addressed not to me, his lawfully wedded wife, but to a certain Tiffany Dubois. Tiffany, for those of you not keeping score at home, was the ex. The one he swore was ancient history, a mistake. A phase I went through in college when I thought frosted tips were a good idea. Apparently, some phases just have a really long shelf life, like that questionable fruitcake your aunt brings every Christmas. I remember staring at the screen, not with the expected rush of tears or the dramatic collapse onto the kitchen floor that rom-coms would have you believe. No, my initial reaction was a slow, deliberate blink, then another. My brain, usually a bustling metropolis of anxieties and grocery lists, went completely silent. It was like a server crash, but instead of an error message, I just saw Tiffany Dubois, VIP seating, the Flaming Dragons concert, next Saturday. The Flaming Dragons, mind you, were our band. The band we saw on our first date. The band whose lyrics he'd drunkenly serenaded me with at our wedding. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. And I hate toast. My first coherent thought, after the initial system reboot, was, well, isn't that just precious? Not, how could he? Or, my life is over. But precious. Because what else do you call a man who plans a romantic rendezvous with his ex at a concert that holds significant meaning for his current marriage? It wasn't just cheating. It was a performance art piece. A low-budget, highly offensive off-Broadway production of How to Be a Complete and Utter Cad. And I, apparently, was the unwitting understudy who just got replaced without a single rehearsal. I leaned against the counter, the cool granite a stark contrast to the slow burn starting in my chest. It wasn't rage, not exactly. It was more like a simmering, highly concentrated sense of comedic outrage, like watching a clown trip on his own oversized shoes, but the clown is your husband and the shoes are your shared future, and he's definitely not getting up. I mean, seriously? The Flaming Dragons? Did he think I wouldn't notice? Did he think I'd just assume he was going to a monster truck rally dressed in a band t-shirt? The sheer audacity, the blatant disregard for my existence, was almost admirable in its boneheadedness. Almost. I scrolled down, just to confirm. Yes, 2 tickets. Section 103, Row F, seats 11 and 12. Prime viewing. Because if you're going to rekindle an old flame, you might as well do it with a clear view of the stage and excellent acoustics. I imagined them, swaying to Burning Love, maybe sharing a knowing glance during Ashes to Ashes. The mental image was so absurd, so cliché it almost made me snort laugh. Almost. Because beneath the layers of sarcasm and the rising tide of dark humor, there was a tiny, inconvenient spark of something else. Something that felt suspiciously like hurt. But we don't dwell on that. We package it up, tie a sarcastic bow on it, and prepare it for public consumption. My husband, Mark, walked in then, whistling some tuneless melody. He was oblivious, of course. Utterly, gloriously, infuriatingly oblivious. He probably thought he was a master of espionage, a modern-day James Bond of marital deceit. In reality, he was more like Inspector Clouseau, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs so obvious even a blind squirrel with a concussion could follow them. He tossed his keys on the counter, flashed that charming, slightly dimpled smile that had once, long ago, melted my heart. Now it just looked like a poorly executed special effect. "Hey, honey," he chirped, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Long day. Anything exciting happen?" I looked at him, truly looked at him. The man I'd shared a bed with for 10 years, built a life with, argued about dishwashers with, and here he was, planning a secret date with his ex. The sheer banality of his betrayal was almost more insulting than the act itself. It wasn't some grand, passionate affair. It was a concert, like a bad sitcom plot. "Oh, you know," I said, my voice surprisingly level. Just discovered some interesting plans for next Saturday. Seems like someone's going to the Flaming Dragons. I watched his face. The apple paused halfway to his mouth. His eyes, usually a placid blue, darted around like trapped birds. The color drained from his face faster than a politician's integrity. "Oh, yeah," he stammered, recovering with the grace of a drunken giraffe. "Forgot to mention. Work thing. Client entertainment. You know how it is. Last minute." I raised an eyebrow. "Client entertainment? With Tiffany Dubois?" The apple dropped, bounced once, and rolled under the fridge. A fitting metaphor, I thought. His carefully constructed lie, now under the fridge, gathering dust bunnies of deceit. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, if the headlights were actually a freight train labeled, "Your wife knows everything." "Tiffany? Who's Tiffany?" he tried, a pathetic attempt at gaslighting that would have made a toddler roll their eyes. I just smiled. A slow, sweet, utterly terrifying smile. "Oh, you know, the Tiffany. The one who's apparently sitting in section 103, row F, seat 12, next Saturday night. While you're in seat 11. I paused, letting the words hang in the air like a noxious gas. "Funny, I thought our seats were usually in section 102. Guess you got a promotion, huh?" He stood there, mouth agape, looking less like a husband and more like a poorly rendered wax figure of a husband. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, punctuated only by the distant hum of the refrigerator. It was the sound of a marriage imploding, not with a bang, but with the whimper of a man caught red-handed with concert tickets. And in that moment, as I watched his pathetic attempts to conjure a believable lie, a thought solidified in my mind. A truly magnificent, utterly deranged thought. If he wanted to go to the Flaming Dragons concert with an ex, then by all means he would. But he wouldn't be the only one bringing an unexpected +1. Because apparently I wasn't just invisible, I was also transparent enough for him to see right through me and straight into the arms of his past. Well, darling, transparency works both ways, and sometimes it comes with a surprise guest. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. Mark, my dear, sweet, utterly clueless husband, had managed to turn our 10-year marriage into a punchline. And I, being the benevolent, long-suffering wife, felt it was my civic duty to ensure the joke landed. Hard. He'd tried to gaslight me, to make me doubt my own eyes, my own intelligence. "Who's Tiffany?" he'd asked, as if she were a mythical creature, a unicorn of infidelity. My internal monologue, however, was already drafting the eulogy for his social standing. Here lies Mark's reputation, died of acute stupidity, complicated by chronic infidelity, buried under a mountain of concert tickets. The days leading up to the concert became a masterclass in passive-aggressive performance art. Mark walked on eggshells, stammering apologies that sounded less like remorse and more like a poorly rehearsed hostage negotiation. "It's just a work thing, Sarah. An old friend from college. Networking, you know?" Oh, I knew. I knew that networking in his dictionary meant rekindling old flames under the guise of professional development. I'd just nod, offer a tight, enigmatic smile, and then hum a Flaming Dragons song off-key while doing the dishes. He'd flinch. It was glorious. Meanwhile, my mind was a beehive of activity, buzzing with possibilities. The first step, naturally, was to secure my own tickets. Not just any tickets, mind you. Tickets in section 103, row F, as close to seats 11 and 12 as humanly possible. I wanted a front row seat to the implosion, a ringside view of the karmic fireworks. It took some doing, a little creative refreshing of the ticket vendor's website, and perhaps a slightly unethical use of a bot, but I managed it. Seats 9 and 10. Perfect. Just 2 seats away. Close enough to hear the whispers, to see the subtle shifts in their body language, to witness the precise moment their faces registered pure, unadulterated horror. But tickets were only half the equation. The real genius, the true pièce de résistance, lay in the +1. Mark was bringing his ex. What was the logical, most exquisitely painful countermove? Bringing her current husband. Because if I was being made a fool of, then by all means, let's expand the audience. And here I thought my biggest talent was making gourmet toast. Turns out, it was orchestrating public humiliation with surgical precision. Finding Tiffany's husband wasn't as hard as it sounds. Social media, bless its intrusive little heart, is a treasure trove of information. A quick dive into Tiffany's public profiles revealed a plethora of smiling selfies with a man named David. David, by all accounts, seemed like a perfectly pleasant, unsuspecting fellow. He was an accountant, according to his LinkedIn profile, which meant he probably appreciated order, logic, and the meticulous balancing of books. I imagined he'd be particularly perturbed by the sudden imbalance in his marital ledger. The tricky part was contacting him. How do you casually slide into someone's DMs with, "Hey, your wife is secretly meeting my husband at a concert. Want to crash their party?" It required finesse. It required a touch of dramatic flair. It required a complete disregard for social norms. All things I was surprisingly adept at, especially when fueled by a potent cocktail of indignation and dark amusement. I found his work email. Professional. Direct. Less likely to be ignored than a random Instagram message. I crafted the email with the care of a master chef preparing a poisoned dish. Subject: regarding the Flaming Dragons concert, urgent and confidential. Dear Mr. Miller, I began, keeping it formal. My name is Sarah Thompson. I am writing to you under unusual circumstances regarding your wife, Tiffany Dubois, and my husband, Mark Thompson. I recently discovered that they have made plans to attend the Flaming Dragons concert this Saturday, July 26th, at the Arena, in Section 103, Row F, Seats 11 and 12. As you can imagine, this information has come as quite a surprise to me, given my marital status to Mark. I believe you may find this information equally illuminating. I have also secured tickets in the same row, just 2 seats away, seats 9 and 10. I understand this may be shocking, but I believe it is important that you are aware of this situation. I would be open to discussing this further, should you wish to gain a clearer understanding of the circumstances. My number is my number. I reread it. Professional, factual, no accusations, just cold, hard data. It was a digital hand grenade, primed and ready. I hit send. Then I held my breath. For approximately 3 minutes before my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. David. Ms. Thompson. His voice was tight, strained. This is David Miller. I just received your email. Mr. Miller, I replied, adopting my most soothing yet slightly ominous tone. Thank you for calling. I apologize for the unconventional approach, but I felt it was necessary. He cleared his throat. Necessary? You're telling me my wife is going to a concert with your husband? Her ex? There was a rising incredulity in his voice, a hint of the storm brewing beneath the surface. That is precisely what I am telling you, Mr. Miller, and not just any concert. The Flaming Dragons, a band with sentimental value to my husband and me. I let that sink in, the implication of a shared past now being desecrated. I don't understand, he stammered. Tiffany said she was going with her sister, a girls' night out. Ah, the classic girls' night out, I mused. A timeless alibi, much like working late or my phone died. Very original. I paused. Look, Mr. Miller, I'm not looking for drama, just clarity. And perhaps a bit of company. I have 2 tickets right next to theirs. I was planning on going, regardless. The question is, would you care to join me? For moral support, of course. And perhaps to witness a truly spectacular act of marital stupidity unfold in real time. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could practically hear his brain whirring, processing the sheer audacity of my proposal. Then, a slow, deliberate sigh. You want me to crash their date? With you? Crash implies a lack of invitation, I corrected him. Consider it a strategic deployment, a tactical intervention. We'd simply be enjoying the music and the show, the one on stage and the one unfolding in row F. Another pause. Then a low chuckle, a dry, slightly unhinged sound that resonated with my own brand of humor. You know what, Ms. Thompson? You've got yourself a deal. What time should I meet you? My plan was so subtle it practically whispered surprise from a megaphone. The anticipation was a delicious, slow-burning fire in my gut. I spent the next few days perfecting my "I'm just here for the music" face, which involved a slight smirk and an almost imperceptible twitch of the eyebrow. Mark, bless his oblivious heart, continued to act like a man who had successfully hidden a small elephant in our living room. He'd ask me about my day, completely unaware that my day involved orchestrating his public downfall. It was truly a testament to his self-absorption. The night of the concert arrived, cloaked in the humid embrace of a late summer evening. I dressed meticulously, not in a revenge dress. Those are for people who still care about looking good for their ex. No, I chose an outfit that screamed comfortably chic, utterly unbothered, and possibly slightly amused by the impending chaos. A flowing dark top, tailored jeans, and a pair of sensible yet stylish ankle boots. My hair was casually tossed, my makeup minimal but sharp. I wanted to look like I'd just popped out for a casual evening, not like I was about to detonate a marital bomb. David arrived promptly at the designated meeting spot, a coffee shop a few blocks from the arena. He was taller than I expected, with kind eyes that currently held a mixture of apprehension and a nascent spark of mischief. He looked like a man who usually spent his evenings poring over spreadsheets, not embarking on covert operations. "Ms. Thompson?" he greeted, extending a hand. His grip was firm. "Sarah, please," I replied, shaking his hand. "And you must be David. Thanks for coming. I promise. This will be memorable." He offered a wry smile. "I'm hoping for memorable in a good story to tell the grandkids way, not a therapy for the rest of my life way." "Oh, definitely the former," I assured him, though I couldn't make any guarantees. "Consider this an exercise in extreme reality television. You're a guest star. I'm the executive producer." We walked towards the arena, the air thick with the murmur of excited fans and the distant thrum of the soundcheck. The energy was palpable, a perfect backdrop for the drama about to unfold. I felt a strange sense of calm, a quiet confidence that bordered on exhilaration. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about reclaiming my narrative. It was about turning their pathetic little secret into a spectacle. "So," David began, breaking the silence, "what's the game plan? Do we just walk in and sit down?" "Precisely," I said, a mischievous glint in my eye. "The element of surprise is key. We want to catch them completely off guard. No grand entrance, no dramatic pronouncements. Just a quiet, unassuming arrival, like a particularly annoying yet inevitable tax audit." He chuckled. "You've thought this through." "Oh, David," I sighed dramatically. "I've thought through every excruciating detail. My plan was so discreet, it practically whispered surprise from a megaphone. I've even practiced my "oh, fancy meeting you here" face. It's a work in progress, but I think I've nailed the perfect blend of feigned innocence and simmering malice. We navigated the throngs of people, the scent of popcorn and stale beer filling the air. As we approached Section 103, my heart gave a little flutter. Not of nerves, but of anticipation. It was like the final moments before the curtain rises on a play you've spent weeks rehearsing. "Okay," I whispered to David. "They should be right there. Row F." And there they were. Mark, looking smug and self-satisfied, leaning in close to Tiffany, who was laughing, her head thrown back. They looked comfortable, too comfortable. A wave of something akin to nausea washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of renewed determination. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about David, too, and the principle of the thing. "Ready?" I murmured to David. He took a deep breath, "As I'll ever be." We moved into the row, slowly, deliberately. Mark and Tiffany were engrossed in their conversation, oblivious to the two figures approaching from the side. We reached our seats, 2 spaces away from them. I took my seat first, then David. I kept my gaze fixed on the stage, pretending to adjust my purse, giving them a moment to register our presence. Then, slowly, I turned my head. My eyes landed on Mark first. His back was to me, but I could feel the shift in the air. Tiffany, however, was facing our direction, mid-laugh. Her eyes, still sparkling with amusement, suddenly widened. Her smile faltered, then vanished. Her jaw went slack. It was a beautiful, beautiful sight. "Well, hello there," I said, my voice sweet as poisoned candy. "Fancy meeting you here." Tiffany's head snapped towards Mark, her eyes screaming. Mark, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere, turned. His eyes met mine. The color drained from his face faster than a bathtub full of secrets. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a goldfish, gasping for air. Then his gaze shifted to David. David, who was now offering a polite, if somewhat strained, smile. "Tiffany," David said, his voice calm, almost unnervingly so. "Didn't realize you were a Flaming Dragons fan. You said you were going with your sister." The silence that followed was so profound, you could hear the collective gasp of every single one of my internal organs. Mark looked from me to David, then back to Tiffany, his eyes darting wildly, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Tiffany, meanwhile, had gone from pale to a shade of green, usually reserved for alien invasions. Her face was a masterpiece of mortification. "David? Sarah?" Mark finally managed, his voice a strangled whisper. What are you two doing here?" "Oh, you know," I said, leaning back in my seat, a picture of casual indifference. "Just enjoying the music. And the company. David here is a big fan of the dragons, aren't you, David?" David nodded, his smile widening, a hint of genuine amusement now playing on his lips. "Absolutely. And it's always nice to have company at a concert, especially when you're unexpectedly reunited with old friends." He emphasized unexpectedly, with a subtle, yet devastating flick of his eyes towards Tiffany. Tiffany looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole, preferably with Mark still attached to her arm. She tried to whisper something to Mark, but he was too busy staring at me, then at David, then back at me, as if trying to solve a particularly difficult math problem involving two uninvited guests and a very public betrayal. The band started their first song, a roaring anthem that usually got the crowd on their feet. But in our little corner of Section 103, the only thing roaring was the tension. Mark and Tiffany remained frozen, their faces a tableau of shock and horror. I, on the other hand, was swaying gently to the music, a beatific smile on my face. David, after a moment of awkward silence, started tapping his foot, a small, defiant gesture. "So," I said, turning to Mark, my voice just loud enough to be heard over the music, "this must be that client entertainment you were talking about. Very intimate client, wouldn't you say?" Mark flinched. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Tiffany, meanwhile, was attempting to shrink into her seat, as if hoping to become one with the upholstery. "You know," David chimed in, equally calmly, "Tiffany told me she was going with her sister. Funny how these things work out, isn't it? Small world." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife, or a very sharp, well-aimed glare. Mark finally found his voice, a desperate plea. "Sarah, can we talk about this later? Not here." "Oh, darling," I purred. "Where else? This is where you chose to make your grand statement. Seems only fair we have our little family reunion right here, in front of God and everyone who paid good money for these tickets." The band launched into their second song, a power ballad about heartbreak and betrayal. The lyrics seemed to mock them, echoing their predicament with a cruel, poetic precision. I never thought a few strategically placed concert tickets could cause such a public meltdown. And here I thought only rock stars did that. The concert was a blur of flashing lights, roaring music, and the silent, excruciating drama unfolding in our row. Mark and Tiffany were trapped. They couldn't leave without drawing even more attention, and they couldn't stay without enduring the silent, mocking presence of their respective spouses. Every attempt they made to whisper, to argue, to even glance at each other, was met with my serene smile or David's polite yet knowing nod. At one point, Mark tried to get up, presumably to escape to the concession stand or, ideally, to another dimension. But I just casually extended my leg, blocking his path. "Oh, are you leaving, dear? Already?" The flaming dragons are just getting warmed up. He sank back into his seat, defeated. Tiffany, meanwhile, looked like she was actively trying to phase through the floor. The sheer, unadulterated pleasure of watching them squirm was almost better than the concert itself. Almost. David, to his credit, was a fantastic co-conspirator. He'd occasionally lean over and make a perfectly innocuous comment, like, "Great guitar solo, isn't it?" directed at Tiffany, who would just nod stiffly, her eyes wide with panic. Or he'd ask Mark, "So, Mark, still into the classics, huh? Thought you'd moved on to more contemporary sounds." The subtext was so loud, it practically needed its own microphone. During the intermission, the crowd around us started to disperse for refreshments. Mark saw his chance. He leaned over, his voice low and urgent. "Sarah, please. This is insane. Let's just go home. We can talk." "Talk?" I raised an eyebrow. "Darling, we've had 10 years to talk, and somehow, in that time, you managed to forget who your +1 to the Flaming Dragons concert was supposed to be. I think we're beyond talking. We're in the experiential learning phase now." Tiffany, emboldened by the slightly emptier row, finally spoke, her voice a strained whisper. "David, this is a misunderstanding. Mark and I were just catching up." David turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Catching up? At a rock concert? With VIP seats? You know, Tiffany, my accountant's brain struggles with that kind of catching up. It doesn't quite balance the books." His calm demeanor was far more terrifying than any outburst. It was the quiet disappointment of a man who dealt in facts and figures, now confronted with a glaring, illogical lie. Mark, sensing the tide turning against him, tried to pull rank. "David, this is a private matter between my wife and me." "Oh, it stopped being private the moment you invited someone else's wife to a concert," I interjected, my voice sweet. "And it became a public spectacle the moment I bought tickets 2 seats away. Consider this a live performance of our marital issues. We're just providing a little extra entertainment for the crowd." A few people in the rows behind us, who had clearly been enjoying the silent drama unfolding, snickered. Mark's face turned a deeper shade of crimson. Tiffany looked like she was about to spontaneously combust. It was glorious. Truly. The second half of the concert was even more excruciating for them. They barely spoke, barely moved. Mark kept glancing at his watch, clearly counting down the minutes until their public torment was over. Tiffany had resorted to staring fixedly at the stage, as if the lead singer held the answers to all her life's regrets. David and I, on the other hand, were having a grand old time. We even shared a bag of overpriced popcorn, exchanging knowing glances and silent, triumphant smiles. When the final encore finished and the house lights came up, the relief on Mark and Tiffany's faces was palpable. They practically bolted from their seats, pushing past us with mumbled apologies that sounded more like desperate pleas for escape. "Well," I said, standing up and stretching, "that was quite the show, wasn't it?" David chuckled, a genuine, hearty laugh this time. "Indeed, a truly unforgettable performance." He looked at me, a newfound respect in his eyes. "You know, Ms. Thompson, I've always been a fan of efficiency, and that, right there, was remarkably efficient." "Sarah," I corrected him, a genuine smile finally breaking through my carefully constructed facade. "And thank you, David. You were an excellent co-star." We walked out of the arena, leaving Mark and Tiffany to their awkward public reckoning. The air outside was cooler, the night sky a vast, indifferent canvas. The crowds dispersed, their excited chatter fading into the distance. My phone buzzed. It was Mark. I ignored it. Then again, and again. He was probably having a meltdown of epic proportions, and frankly, I was too busy enjoying the fresh air and the sweet taste of vindication. David walked me to my car. "So," he said, hands in his pockets, "what happens now?" "Now," I replied, opening my car door, "we go home. And they get to figure out how to explain this little client entertainment to their respective spouses. I imagine it'll be quite the conversation." He nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I suppose it will." He paused, then looked at me. "Thank you, Sarah. Seriously, I had no idea." "You're welcome, David," I said, a genuine warmth in my voice. Sometimes the best way to deal with a messy situation is to make it even messier, and then stand back and watch the fireworks. We exchanged numbers, not for a romantic rendezvous, but for a mutual support group of the recently enlightened, a shared understanding of the ridiculousness of it all. As I drove home, the city lights blurred into streaks of color. The anger, the hurt, the indignation. They were still there, but they were no longer overwhelming. They were tempered by a profound sense of satisfaction and a healthy dose of dark humor. The house was dark when I arrived. Mark was probably still out, either trying to track down Tiffany or drowning his sorrows in a very large, very public glass of something strong. I didn't care. I walked into the quiet living room, kicked off my shoes, and sank onto the sofa. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was liberating. I pulled out my phone. Mark had left 5 voicemails, each one more frantic than the last. I deleted them all without listening. Then I opened my social media. A new message request. From David. Just got home. Tiffany is speechless. Literally. Thank you again. Best concert ever. I smiled. The next few days were a whirlwind of hushed conversations, awkward silences, and the slow, painful unraveling of a decade-long marriage. Mark tried to apologize, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but his words were hollow, echoing in the cavernous space that had once been our trust. I just listened, my expression neutral, occasionally offering a sarcastic comment that would make him flinch. "Oh, you're sorry? I thought you were just practicing your client entertainment skills." The divorce was surprisingly swift, mostly because Mark was too mortified to put up much of a fight. The details are boring, filled with legal jargon and the division of assets. What wasn't boring was the look on his face when he realized the true cost of his harmless little concert date. Socially, he was a pariah. His friends, many of whom were mutual, found his behavior less than admirable. His colleagues, who had heard whispers of the concert incident, treated him with a mixture of pity and thinly veiled amusement. I never imagined a signature on a piece of paper would make so many grown men pale, and no one was even into art. Turns out, public humiliation is a surprisingly effective deterrent. Tiffany and David's situation was equally messy. I heard through the grapevine that their marriage was on life support, gasping its last breaths. Good. Karma, it turns out, has excellent seating arrangements. My new normal was surprisingly normal and peaceful. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor with a wicked sense of humor. I learned that being invisible can be a superpower, especially when you're planning a grand reveal. I started going to concerts again, but this time, with friends who actually wanted to be there, and I learned to trust my gut, even when it was telling me something utterly ridiculous. In the end, I learned that some concerts are less about the music and more about the unexpected encore of karma. My life wasn't a tragedy. It was a dark comedy, and I was finally the one writing the punchlines. Turns out, the best seat in the house was the one where I got to watch their faces fall. And that, my friends, was a symphony.